He sealed himself inside a wooden box, with barely enough space to move. No guarantee of air, and no certainty he would survive the journey. And then, he shipped himself hundreds of miles away. This isn't a movie. This really happened. His name was Henry Box Brown, and his story is one of the most unbelievable journeys in history. Henry Brown was born into slavery in the early 1800s. Like many others, his life was controlled by forces outside of his own choices. But what made his story different was what pushed him to act. At one point in his life, his wife and children were sold away from him, taken, separated, gone. And in that moment, everything changed. Because for him, this wasn't just about surviving anymore. It became about freedom, about finding a way out, no matter how impossible it seemed. But here's the reality he faced. There were no easy paths, no clear options, no guarantees. Every possible decision came with risk, and most plans required something he didn't have: time. So instead of waiting, he started thinking differently, looking at the world around him, not for what it was, but for what it could be used for. And that's when an idea came to him. Not a simple idea, not a safe one, but one that just might work. If he could place himself inside a box and have it shipped as cargo, he could travel without being seen. No walking long distances, no following open routes, no relying on chance encounters, just one journey, hidden in plain sight. But the risks were real. The box would be small, the trip would be long, and there would be moments where he had no control over what happened next. Still, he chose to go through with it, because sometime when the path in front of you doesn't exist, you create one. And what he was about to do would test everything: his patience, his strength, and his will to survive. Because once that box was sealed, there was no turning back, and the journey he was about to take would become one of the most daring acts of self-liberation in history. The day finally came. Henry Brown stepped into the wooden box, the same one that would carry him hundreds of miles away. It wasn't big. In fact, it was just large enough for him to fit inside. He had to fold his body, tuck his knees, and position himself in a way that would allow him to stay there for hours. Before the lid was closed, he took one last breath of open air, because once that box was sealed, everything would change. The top was nailed shut. Darkness took over. No light, very little space, just silence, and the unknown. The box was labeled as cargo, handled like any other package. No special care, no awareness of what was inside. And then, the journey began. He was moved, lifted, shifted from place to place. At times, the box was turned, tilted, even flipped upside down. And inside, Henry had no control over any of it. Imagine that, being completely still, in a confined space, unable to stretch, unable to adjust freely, not knowing how long it would last. Hours passed, then more hours. The air inside the box grew limited. Each breath mattered. Every movement had to be controlled, because too much motion could make things worse. And then there were moments where the box stayed upside down, blood rushing to his head, pressure building, time stretching longer than it felt. At one point, he later described feeling close to losing consciousness, but he didn't give up, because he knew this was his only chance. He focused, stayed still, waited, endured, and through all of it, he held on to one thing: the belief that the journey would lead somewhere different, that on the other side of that box, there was a new beginning. And finally, after nearly a full day of travel, movement slowed. The box was set down, still sealed, still silent. But something was different, because this time, when the lid was opened, it wouldn't be the same place he left. And the moment that box opened would change everything. After hours of darkness, after being moved, turned, and handled like cargo, the box finally stopped. For the first time in what felt like forever, everything was still. No movement, no shifting, just silence. And then, voices, faint at first, but real. People were nearby, and slowly, carefully, the lid of the box began to open. Light broke through the darkness. Fresh air rushed in. And in that moment, Henry Brown took his first full breath of freedom. Think about that. After being sealed inside a small wooden box for nearly an entire day, uncertain if he would make it, the journey had worked. He had made it. He had successfully transported himself hundreds of miles away, hidden in plain sight, to a place where his life could begin again. But the moment didn't just belong to him, because the people who opened that box were part of a network. Individuals who had helped make this possible, who understood what was at stake, who knew that what they were doing mattered. And when they saw him emerge, alive, they knew they had just witnessed something extraordinary. Because this wasn't just an escape, it was a statement, a moment that showed what determination could look like when someone refuses to accept the limits placed in front of them. Henry Brown didn't follow a traditional path. He didn't take a route that others had walked before. He created his own, and that's what made his story so powerful. Because sometimes, the path forward doesn't exist until someone builds it. And in his case, that path was a box, a simple object, transformed into something much more, a way out, a chance, a risk that turned into a new beginning. But even after that moment, his story didn't end there. Because what he did next would make sure his story didn't stay hidden. Henry Brown began to share what he had experienced. Not just the journey, but the meaning behind it, the courage it took, the decision he made, the risks he faced, and his story reached people. It spread, because it was something that couldn't be ignored. A reminder that even in the most difficult situations, there are individuals who find a way to move forward, who find a way to act, who find a way to change their circumstances. And over time, his story became more than just an event. It became part of history, a story that continues to be told, not just because of what he did, but because of what it represents. The willingness to take a chance, to act in the face of uncertainty, to believe that something different is possible, even when the odds don't guarantee it. And that's why this moment matters, because it shows us something deeper, that sometimes the most powerful decisions are the ones made when there's no clear path ahead, only a choice and the courage to follow through with it. Henry Box Brown's story didn't end when that box opened. In many ways, that's where his voice began. Because what he had done was something people couldn't ignore. He didn't just escape. He did it in a way that forced people to stop and think. A man, placing himself inside a small wooden box, risking everything for the chance at a different life. That kind of story doesn't stay quiet. And Henry Brown made sure of that. He began to share his experience, not just as a moment in time, but as a message. A message about determination, about the willingness to act, even when the outcome isn't guaranteed. He spoke about the journey, the decision, the risk, and the meaning behind it. Because for him, this wasn't just about reaching a new place. It was about what it took to get there and what it represented. His story spread. People listened because it wasn't just powerful, it was unforgettable. And over time, it became part of a larger understanding of history. A reminder that there were individuals who didn't just wait for change. They created it, even in the most unexpected ways. But here's what makes his story even more important today. It's not just about what happened back then, it's about what it shows us now. Because the idea behind his journey still applies. Sometimes the path forward isn't obvious. Sometimes there isn't a clear direction, no step-by-step guide, no guarantee that things will work out. And in those moments, you're faced with a decision. Do you stay where you are, or do you take a chance on something different? Henry Brown chose to take that chance. He chose action over uncertainty, movement over waiting, and that decision changed everything. Not just for him, but for the way his story would be remembered. Because it became more than just a moment. It became a symbol of courage, of creativity, of finding a way forward, even when the options seem limited. And that's why stories like this matter, because they remind us that history isn't just made up of big events, it's made up of individual choices, moments where someone decided to do something different, to think differently, to act. And those moments can create change that lasts far beyond that point in time. So if this is your first time hearing about Henry Box Brown, just know this. You've just learned about one of the most daring journeys in history, a story that proves that sometimes the most powerful way forward is the one no one expects. If you made it this far, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to Untold Black History, and share it so more people can learn the stories they were never taught. And I want to hear from you. Do you think you would have had the courage to take a risk like that? Or would you have chosen a different path? Because sometimes one decision can change everything.